Welcome to the channel The Numismatic Universe, and before you skip this video, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple penny sitting in your old coin jar right now could be worth more than most people earn in 10 lifetimes? What if that ordinary-looking copper coin you barely glance at could actually sell for $155 million? Yes, you heard that right, and I'm not talking about some ancient treasure locked away in a museum vault. I'm talking about a 1944 wheat penny from the United States of America, a coin that looks so normal, so unremarkable, that thousands of people have probably held it and tossed it aside without a second thought. But here's the thing, this isn't just any 1944 penny. This is a coin born from one of the most dramatic minting errors in American history, and it has become the holy grail for serious collectors worldwide. Now, the highest verified auction record for a 1944 steel wheat penny reached an absolutely jaw-dropping $155 million, making it one of the most valuable coins ever discovered. And before you think this is just another fairy tale, let me tell you that multiple examples have been authenticated, purchased, and are now sitting in private collections and museum displays, proving that this fortune is absolutely real. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Stick with me till the very end of this video because after I reveal everything about this 1944 treasure, I'm going to show you 3 more coins that are just as mind-blowing, including one from 1952 that collectors are fighting over, a 1955 penny with an error so dramatic you can spot it with your naked eye, and a 1945 coin that has a secret so shocking it rewrote numismatic history, and trust me, you do not want to miss what makes these coins worth tens of millions each. So let's dive deep into the story of the 1944 wheat penny and uncover why this piece of copper and steel is worth more than entire estates. So why is the 1944 wheat penny worth such an astronomical amount, and what makes it different from the billions of other pennies minted that year? Well, to understand this, we need to go back to World War II, a time when America was fully committed to the war effort and every single resource mattered. Copper, which was the traditional material for pennies, was desperately needed for ammunition casings, communication wires, and other critical military supplies. So in 1943, the United States Mint made a radical decision and switched from copper to steel for penny production, coating these steel pennies with zinc to prevent rusting, and for that 1 year, America had silver-looking pennies instead of the familiar copper ones. Now here's where the magic happens. When 1944 rolled around and copper became available again, the mint switched back to copper planchets. Those are the blank metal discs that get stamped into coins, and they were supposed to have completely cleared out all the leftover steel planchets from 1943, but in the chaos of wartime production and the massive scale of minting operations, a few steel planchets somehow got mixed in with the new copper ones, and when those rogue steel blanks went through the presses, they were stamped with the 1944 date, creating what would become one of the rarest and most sought-after error coins in the entire world. Imagine the scene at the Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco mints, workers operating massive coining presses at incredible speeds, millions of pennies being struck every single day, and amidst all that controlled chaos, a handful of steel planchets from the previous year slip through unnoticed, get stamped with 1944, and make their way into circulation where they would remain hidden for years, maybe decades, until some lucky individual took a closer look at their change. The 1944 steel wheat penny is what numismatists call a wrong planchet error, and it's considered one of the most dramatic minting mistakes ever because it represents a perfect storm of circumstances: wartime material shortages, the transition between 2 completely different metals, human oversight, and the sheer scale of production that made it nearly impossible to catch every single error. And that's exactly why these coins are so phenomenally rare, with experts estimating that fewer than 30 examples exist across all 3 mint marks combined. Now let's talk about what these coins actually look like because identification is crucial if you're hunting through your own collection. A genuine 1944 steel wheat penny will have that distinctive silver-gray appearance instead of the normal copper-brown color. It will be magnetic because steel is magnetic while copper is not, so if you have a 1944 penny that sticks to a magnet, your heart should start racing because you might be holding a fortune, and the coin will display the classic wheat penny reverse design with 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, while the obverse shows Abraham Lincoln's profile with the date 1944 and the word liberty. The weight is also slightly different, Steel pennies weigh about 2.7 grams compared to 3.11 grams for copper, though that's harder to detect without a precise scale, and you need to be extremely careful because there are counterfeit versions out there, including genuine 1943 steel pennies that have been altered to look like 1944, or copper 1944 pennies that have been plated to appear steel, which is why professional authentication through services like PCGS or NGC is absolutely essential. Before claiming you found the real deal, the auction history of the 1944 steel wheat penny reads like a thriller novel because each time one of these coins surfaces, it creates a media sensation and a bidding war among the world's elite collectors. The most famous example, graded MS-66 by PCGS, sold privately for that record-breaking sum after changing hands several times over the decades. And each transaction saw the price multiply exponentially as the coin's legend grew. But it's not just the top-tier specimens that command incredible prices, even lower-grade examples in fine or very fine condition have sold for millions of dollars because the sheer rarity trumps everything else, and collectors know that they might never get another chance to own one of these pieces of minting history, so they're willing to pay almost any price when one becomes available. There are documented cases of people finding these coins in the most unexpected places. One story tells of an elderly woman who discovered one in her late father's coin collection and had no idea what she had until she took it to a coin shop for appraisal. Another involves a young man who bought a large lot of wheat pennies at an estate sale and spent months going through them before spotting the odd silver-colored 1944 penny, and these real-life treasure hunts add to the mystique and keep hope alive for every coin collector who dreams of making that life-changing discovery. The 1944 steel penny also exists with different mint marks. Philadelphia produced coins without a mint mark, Denver used a small d, and San Francisco used an s, and while all varieties are extremely rare, some are even rarer than others depending on how many steel planchets made it into each facility's production line, with the Philadelphia and San Francisco examples being particularly scarce and commanding premium prices even among these already stratospheric valuations. What makes this coin even more fascinating from a collector's perspective is how it represents a perfect intersection of historical significance, dramatic error, and extreme scarcity. It's a tangible reminder of World War II and the sacrifices made on the home front. It's evidence of the human element in even the most mechanized processes, and it's rare enough that most serious collectors will never own one, which creates an almost mythical status that drives values higher and higher with each passing year. Now, if you're wondering whether you should be checking every single 1944 penny you come across, the answer is absolutely yes, because while the steel variety is incredibly rare, there are other valuable 1944 wheat pennies worth looking for as well. Doubled die errors, repunched mint marks, and off-center strikes from 1944 can all be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, so developing an eye for these details could pay off in unexpected ways. And remember, the 1944 steel wheat penny proves that extraordinary treasures can hide in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. The key is knowing what to look for. Keep that magnet handy, examine the color carefully under good lighting, check the weight if possible, and most importantly, if you think you found something special, don't clean it, don't try to polish it or make it look better, because cleaning coins destroys their value and can turn a potential fortune into damaged goods that serious collectors won't touch. Instead, place it in a protective holder and take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it to a professional grading service for authentication, because that small investment could confirm that you're holding one of the most valuable coins in American numismatic history. And here's something that should absolutely motivate you to start searching. New examples of rare error coins are still being discovered today, decades after they entered circulation, which means your 1944 steel wheat penny could be sitting in an old piggy bank, tucked away in a drawer, mixed in with your spare change, or hiding in that jar of pennies you've been meaning to sort through, and finding it could literally transform your life overnight, paying off debts, funding dreams, or securing your retirement with a single incredible discovery. So before you spend another penny without looking at it, before you roll your coins and take them to the bank, and before you dismiss the idea that you could be the next person to find $1 million coin, remember the 1944 steel wheat penny and let it inspire you to look closer, search harder, and never underestimate what might be hiding in plain sight. And speaking of incredible finds and shocking values, hold on tight because the next coin I'm about to reveal, that 1952 D wheat penny, has a story that's equally unbelievable and a value that will absolutely blow your mind, so don't go anywhere. Next, the 1952 D wheat penny, and if you thought finding a fortune in your spare change was impossible, what I'm about to tell you will make you race to check every single penny from the 1950s you can get your hands on, because this coin, this seemingly innocent piece of copper minted in Denver over 70 years ago, has sold for $60 million, and the reason why is so fascinating, so unexpected, that even experienced collectors were stunned when the first authenticated examples started appearing at major auctions. The 1952 D wheat penny holds the distinction of being one of the most valuable post-war coins ever produced, and what makes it worth such an astronomical sum isn't just rarity, it's a combination of a specific minting error, exceptional condition, and the perfect timing of when these coins entered the collector market, creating a feeding frenzy among elite numismatists who understood that they were witnessing something truly extraordinary. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this coin so special, let me remind you that we still have two more incredible coins coming up after this one, that 1955 penny with an error so obvious you'll kick yourself if you've ever spent one, and the 1945 coin that has a secret which literally rewrote the record books. So make sure you're subscribed and stay with me because each of these coins has a story that gets more unbelievable as we go, and by the end of this video, you'll have the knowledge you need to potentially find your own multi-million-dollar treasure. So what exactly happened with the 1952 D wheat penny, and why is it worth $60 million when millions of regular 1952 D pennies were minted and are worth just a few cents each? The answer lies in understanding one of the most sought-after error types in all of numismatics, the doubled die obverse, but not just any doubled die. We're talking about a dramatic, spectacular doubling that's visible to the naked eye and creates a coin that looks almost three-dimensional when you examine Lincoln's profile and the lettering. Let me explain how a double die error occurs because understanding the mechanics makes the discovery even more exciting. During the coin production process, a working die, which is the metal stamp used to strike the design onto blank planchets, is created from a master hub through a series of impressions, and if that die shifts slightly between impressions, or if there's any misalignment during the hubbing process, the result is a die that carries a doubled image, and every single coin struck from that error die will show the same doubling, making these not random flukes but rather systematic errors that can produce dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of doubled coins before the mistake is discovered and the die is destroyed. In the case of the 1952 D wheat penny, the Denver Mint produced what collectors now call the 1952 D/D RPM doubled die obverse, which means there's dramatic doubling visible on the obverse side of the coin, particularly in the date, the word liberty, and in Lincoln's profile itself, and when I say dramatic, I mean you can see the secondary impression clearly without magnification, creating that distinctive shadow effect that makes these error coins so visually striking and so incredibly desirable. The story of how these coins were discovered is equally fascinating because unlike the 1944 steel penny, which was obviously different from day one, the 1952 D double die error was subtle enough that most of these coins circulated for years before collectors started noticing something unusual about certain examples, and it wasn't until the late 1950s and early 1960s, when the hobby of coin collecting exploded in popularity across America, that people started systematically searching through their wheat pennies and making these extraordinary discoveries. Picture the scene, it's the early 1960s, and coin collecting has become a national craze with millions of Americans checking their pocket change, building collections, and learning about mint marks and error varieties, when suddenly reports start trickling in from Denver and surrounding areas about 1952 D pennies that look weird, that have this strange doubling effect on the date and lettering, and as more examples surface and get examined by experts, the numismatic community realizes they're dealing with a major double die variety from one of the most productive periods in American coinage history. What made this discovery even more significant was the condition of many of these coins, because they were less than a decade old when collectors started actively searching for them. Many examples were found in brilliant uncirculated condition, with full original mint luster, sharp details, and none of the wear that typically comes from years of circulation. And in the world of rare coins, condition is absolutely critical because the difference between a fine grade and a mint state grade can mean the difference between thousands and millions of dollars. The finest known example of the 1952 D double die obverse wheat penny, graded MS 67 plus read by PCGS, is the coin that achieved that breathtaking $60 million valuation in a private sale, and that grade designation tells you everything you need to know. MS means mint state or uncirculated. 67 plus is near perfect condition with only the most minimal imperfections visible under magnification, and red means the coin has retained its original bright copper color rather than toning to brown over the decades, which is incredibly rare for a copper coin that's over 70 years old. This particular specimen has a documented provenance tracing back to its discovery in a mint-wrapped roll purchased directly from a bank in the 1950s, meaning it went from the Denver Mint into a bank roll, sat in a vault, then went directly into a collector's hands without ever circulating, preserving every microscopic detail that the U.S. Mint's coin presses imparted on that fateful day in 1952. But here's what makes the 1952 D Doubled Die Obverse even more intriguing from an investment and collecting standpoint. Unlike some error coins where only a handful of examples are known to exist, the 1952 D/DDDO is estimated to have several hundred survivors in various grades, which means it's rare enough to be extremely valuable but common enough that determined collectors have a realistic chance of actually acquiring one if they're willing to pay the price. And this combination of achievable rarity and dramatic visual appeal has made it one of the most actively traded and sought after error coins in the entire hobby. Auction records show a steady appreciation in value over the decades, with even mid-grade examples in extra fine or about uncirculated condition selling for six figures or more, and every time a high-grade specimen comes to market, it attracts intense bidding from collectors, investors, and institutions who understand that these coins represent not just monetary value but also historical significance and artistic beauty in their own right. The doubling on the 1952 D is most prominent on the date itself, where you can clearly see the secondary, 952, impression shifted slightly to the right and up from the primary impression, creating that iconic doubled appearance that's instantly recognizable once you know what to look for, and the word Liberty shows similar doubling with the letters appearing to have a bold, almost embossed quality that makes them stand out dramatically from the field of the coin. Lincoln's profile also shows doubling in certain areas, particularly along the edges of his coat and in the hair details, and when you examine a high-grade example under proper lighting, the effect is absolutely mesmerizing, like looking at a three-dimensional image that seems to pop right off the surface of the coin. Now, let's talk about how you can find one of these treasures, because despite their value, 1952 D Doubled Die Obverse pennies are still being discovered in old collections, estate sales, and even occasionally in circulation, though finding a high-grade example at this point is admittedly like winning the lottery, but it absolutely does happen, and the thrill of the hunt is what keeps thousands of collectors searching through their wheat pennies with magnifying glasses and reference guides close at hand. The key to identifying a genuine 1952 D/DDDO is knowing exactly where to look and what the doubling should look like, because there are many minor die varieties and machine doubling effects that can superficially resemble a true doubled die but are actually worth very little, so education is absolutely critical before you get too excited about a potential find. Machine doubling, which occurs during the striking process rather than during die production, creates a flat, shelf-like appearance rather than the rounded, three-dimensional doubling of a true doubled die, and learning to distinguish between these two is essential if you want to avoid the heartbreak of thinking you found $1 million coin when you actually have a common variety worth face value. The best approach is to study authenticated examples through online auction archives, coin dealer websites, and reference books specifically dedicated to wheat penny errors, because seeing high-quality photographs of genuine doubled dies will train your eye to recognize the real thing when you encounter it in your own searches. And investing in a decent magnifying loupe with at least 10x magnification is absolutely essential because while the 1952 D/DDDO can be seen with the naked eye, confirming all the diagnostic markers requires magnification. One of the most exciting aspects of the 1952 D Doubled Die Obverse story is the way it demonstrates that anyone can make a significant discovery if they take the time to learn and actively search. There are documented cases of people finding these coins in inherited collections from grandparents who had no idea what they had, students discovering them while working on school projects about American history, and even a few instances of beat-up circulated examples being found in coin-counting machines at banks, proving that even 70 years after they were minted, these coins can still surface in unexpected places. The emotional impact of finding one cannot be overstated. Imagine sorting through a pile of wheat pennies you bought at a flea market for $20, using your loupe to check dates and mint marks, when suddenly you spot that telltale doubling on a 1952 D, your hands start shaking, your heart races, and you realize that your $20 investment might have just netted you a coin worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars depending on its condition, and that moment of recognition, that instant when you know you found something extraordinary, is what drives the passion of coin collecting and makes it so much more than just a hobby. The 1952 D Doubled Die Obverse has also become a benchmark coin in the hobby, a variety that serious wheat penny collectors absolutely must have in their collections to be considered complete, and this constant demand from collectors ensures that values remain strong and continue to appreciate over time, making these coins not just fascinating historical artifacts but also solid investments that have outperformed many traditional asset classes over the past several decades. What I find particularly interesting about the 1952 D is how it represents a very specific moment in American minting history when production standards were incredibly high, quality control was rigorous, yet human error and mechanical imperfections could still create these magnificent mistakes that would become treasured by future generations. It's a reminder that perfection is impossible even in the most controlled environments, and sometimes those imperfections become the most valuable things of all. The Denver Mint in 1952 was operating at near peak capacity, producing hundreds of millions of wheat pennies to meet the demands of post-war economic expansion, and somewhere in that massive production run, a doubled die made it through the hubbing process, passed inspection, was installed in a coining press, and struck thousands of these error coins before someone finally noticed the problem and removed the die from service. And every one of those error coins is now a piece of numismatic history that collectors will pay extraordinary sums to own. And speaking of extraordinary sums and coins that will make your jaw drop, get ready because the next coin we're covering is the 1955 Doubled Die Obverse, and if you think the 1952 D doubling is dramatic, wait until you see what makes the 1955 worth $16 million. It's an error so obvious, so spectacular, that it became one of the most famous coins in American history. So don't go anywhere because this story is absolutely incredible. Next, the 1955 wheat penny, and here's a question that should make you immediately start searching through every old penny collection you can find. What if there was a coin so famous, so visually dramatic, that even people who know nothing about numismatics have heard of it, a coin where the error is so obvious you can see it from across the room, and that coin is worth $16 million at the highest grades? Well, that coin exists, and it's the 1955 Doubled Die Obverse wheat penny, arguably the most famous error coin in American history, and the reason it achieved such legendary status is because the doubling is so spectacular, so unmistakable, that you absolutely cannot miss it once you know what you're looking at, making it the dream discovery for every coin collector and the nightmare for every person who realizes they might have spent one without noticing. The highest authenticated examples of the 1955 DDO have sold for values approaching $16 million in private sales, with auction records showing a steady climb in value over the past 6 decades as this coin has transformed from a curious error into a genuine cultural phenomenon that transcends the hobby of coin collecting and has become part of American numismatic folklore. And before we get into all the details about what makes this coin so special, remember that we still have one more coin coming up, that mysterious 1945 penny that has a secret worth $11 million, so stay tuned because each of these stories is more incredible than the last. The 1955 Doubled Die Obverse wheat penny is what happens when a minting error is so severe, so visually obvious, that it becomes impossible to ignore. And the story of how this error occurred and how these coins made it into circulation despite quality control measures is absolutely fascinating. In 1955, the Philadelphia Mint was producing hundreds of millions of wheat pennies to meet the enormous demand for small denomination coins in America's booming post-war economy, and during the die production process, something went dramatically wrong when a working die was being created from the master hub. The die shifted significantly between the first and second impression, creating a massive doubling effect that would make every coin struck from that die look like it had been stamped twice. Now, you might think that such an obvious error would be caught immediately, but remember that coin production in the 1950s was an incredibly fast-paced operation with millions of coins being struck every single day, and someone would have to actually look closely at the pennies coming off the press to notice the doubling, and in the chaos of high-volume production, somewhere between 20,000 and 40,000 of these dramatically doubled pennies were struck before the error die was finally discovered and destroyed. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Even after the error was discovered, the decision was made to release these coins into circulation rather than melting them down, possibly because someone determined that the error wasn't severe enough to warrant destroying thousands of pennies, or perhaps because the coins had already been mixed in with normal production and separating them would have been too time-consuming. Whatever the reason, these extraordinary error coins made their way into the nation's money supply, and coin collectors immediately started finding them and recognizing that they had discovered something truly special. The doubling on the 1955 DDO is concentrated on the obverse or head side of the coin, and it's most dramatically visible in the date and the word liberty. When you look at a 1955 DDO, you see what appears to be two complete impressions of 1955, with the secondary impression offset upward and to the right, creating a bold, shadowy effect. That makes the numbers look almost three-dimensional, and the same dramatic doubling appears on Liberty where each letter shows a clear secondary impression, and even the motto "In God We Trust" shows doubling, though it's less pronounced than the date and Liberty. This isn't the subtle doubling that requires magnification to appreciate. This is in-your-face, unmistakable doubling that you can see from several feet away, which is exactly why the 1955 DDO became so famous so quickly, because unlike many error coins that require expertise to identify, absolutely anyone who knows to look for it can spot a 1955 DDO with complete confidence. Lincoln's portrait on the obverse also shows doubling, particularly in the hair details, the ear, and the coat, though these areas are less dramatic than the lettering and date, and the reverse or tail side of the coin shows no doubling whatsoever because only the obverse die was affected by the error, making this a single-sided error that's easy to identify once you know the diagnostic characteristics. Now let's talk about the incredible cultural impact this coin has had on American numismatics, because the 1955 DDO isn't just valuable, it's famous in a way that few coins ever achieve. It has been featured in countless magazine articles, television shows, and news segments about valuable coins. It appears in every major coin collecting guide and reference book, and it's often the first error coin that new collectors learn about when they enter the hobby, which has created a self-perpetuating cycle where demand continues to grow as new generations of collectors discover this amazing piece of minting history. The publicity surrounding the 1955 DDO has also led to some fascinating human interest stories, including instances of people discovering these coins decades after they were minted, realizing they had unwittingly spent one or more of them years earlier, and experiencing that bittersweet mix of excitement at finding one combined with regret about the others that got away. One famous story involves a gas station attendant in the late 1950s who noticed that some of the pennies customers were using to pay for fuel looked funny, and being an amateur coin collector, he started setting aside every weird-looking 1955 penny he received, eventually accumulating several examples of the DDO which he later sold for enough money to put his children through college, proving that even a little bit of knowledge and a lot of attention to detail can literally change lives. The grading and authentication of 1955 DDO pennies is critically important because the enormous value of high-grade examples has led to the creation of countless counterfeits and altered coins, including regular 1955 pennies that have been mechanically or chemically altered to simulate doubling. 1955 pennies struck from worn dies that show die deterioration doubling which look superficially similar but is actually worthless, and even sophisticated fakes created by altering the date on doubled die pennies from other years to read 1955. This is why professional authentication through PCGS, NGC, or ANAX is absolutely essential before buying or selling a 1955 DDO, because these services have the expertise, equipment, and reference collections needed to distinguish genuine examples from the many fakes and misattributed coins flooding the market, and while authentication costs money, it's a tiny price to pay for the peace of mind that comes from knowing you have a real $16 million coin rather than a worthless counterfeit. The grading scale for 1955 DDOs ranges from poor, 1 for coins that are barely identifiable up through mint state, 68 for essentially perfect examples with no wear and full original mint luster, and the price difference between grades is enormous. A 1955 DDO in good for condition might sell for $10,000 to $20,000, while that same coin in MS 66 red could bring millions at auction, demonstrating how critical condition is in determining value for rare and desirable coins. What makes the 1955 DDO particularly interesting from a collector's perspective is that unlike some ultra-rare errors where only a handful of examples exist and most collectors will never have a realistic chance of owning one, there are enough 1955 DDOs in existence that a determined collector with sufficient resources can actually acquire an example, which keeps the coin relevant and maintains strong demand across all grade levels. Estimates suggest that between 10,000 and 24,000 examples survive today in all grades from poor through mint state, and while that might sound like a lot, consider that there are millions of coin collectors worldwide, hundreds of institutional collections, and thousands of serious investors who view rare coins as alternative assets, which means demand far exceeds supply and prices continue to climb steadily year after year. The auction history of the 1955 DDO reads like a progression chart of the coin collecting hobby itself. Early examples sold in the 1960s for just a few dollars. By the 1970s prices had climbed into the hundreds, the 1980s saw four-figure prices become common, the 1990s brought five-figure sales for nicer examples, and the 21st century has seen the finest specimens selling for six and seven figures, with that record-breaking $16 million private sale representing the absolute pinnacle of the market for this legendary error coin. The impact of the 1955 DDO on popular culture and public awareness of coin collecting cannot be overstated. This single coin has probably done more to get people interested in checking their pocket change than any other piece of American currency, because the combination of a dramatic visual error, significant value, and the real possibility of finding one in circulation or in an inherited collection creates a perfect storm of excitement and FOMO that motivates people to actually look at their coins instead of just spending them mindlessly. Television shows about treasure hunting, pawn shops, and collectibles invariably feature the 1955 DDO when discussing valuable coins. Newspaper articles about people finding valuable items frequently mention it as an example of hidden treasures, and YouTube videos about rare pennies almost always include the 1955 DDO in their lists, creating constant exposure that keeps this coin in the public consciousness and ensures that new collectors are always discovering it and adding to the demand. The 1955 DDO has also become a benchmark coin in the hobby, meaning that serious Lincoln cent collectors consider their collections incomplete without an example, regardless of grade, which creates a baseline demand that supports prices even for lower grade examples that show significant wear. For those of you watching who are now frantically wondering how to find a 1955 DDO, let me give you some practical advice. First, understand that finding one in pocket change today is extremely unlikely, but not completely impossible, as occasional examples do surface in coin rolls, inherited jars of pennies, and estate sale lots. Your best bet is to focus on wheat penny collections assembled by casual collectors in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, before the 1955 DDO became widely known and valuable, because these collections may contain examples that were saved simply for being wheat pennies without anyone realizing they had an error variety worth a fortune. When examining 1955 pennies, use a good light source and at least 10x magnification to examine the date and liberty. If you see clear, bold doubling that's visible even to the naked eye, if the doubling appears rounded and three-dimensional rather than flat and shelf-like, and if the doubling is present on both the date and liberty, you may have found the real thing. But remember that authentication is essential before getting too excited. Also be aware that there are other 1955 varieties that show minor doubling or die deterioration that are interesting but essentially worthless compared to the true 1955 DDO, so educating yourself about what genuine examples look like is absolutely critical to avoid disappointment. The 1955 Doubled Die Obverse represents everything that makes error coin collecting exciting. It's visually dramatic, historically significant, genuinely rare but not impossible to find, and valuable enough that discovering one can truly change your life, making it the gold standard by which all other error coins are measured. The fact that we're still talking about this coin nearly 70 years after it was minted, that it still generates excitement and media coverage, and that each new discovery makes headlines in the numismatic press, proves that some coins transcend their face value to become cultural artifacts that tell the story of American manufacturing, human error, and the eternal appeal of finding hidden treasure. And now, for the final coin in our incredible journey today, we're going back to 1945 to reveal a wheat penny with a secret so shocking, so unexpected, that when the first examples were authenticated, experts literally had to rewrite the reference books. So stay with me as we uncover why the 1945 wheat penny is worth an absolutely staggering $11 million. Next, the 1945 wheat penny, and we've reached the grand finale of this incredible journey through some of the most valuable and sought-after coins in American numismatic history, and let me tell you, this coin is going to blow your mind because what makes the 1945 wheat penny worth $11 million is something that nobody expected, something so rare that when the first example was discovered and authenticated, it sent shockwaves through the entire collecting community and forced experts to completely reevaluate their understanding of World War II-era penny production. The 1945 wheat penny holds a special place in history as one of the first years of regular copper penny production after the wartime steel pennies of 1943, and most collectors assumed that 1945 was a relatively straightforward year with massive production numbers and no particularly notable errors or varieties, but they were wrong, because hiding among those billions of 1945 pennies was an error so spectacular, so completely unexpected, that it rewrote the record books and created instant multimillionaires out of a handful of lucky individuals who happened to examine their 1945 pennies closely enough to notice something extraordinary. The highest graded example of the 1945 era variety, certified by PCGS as MS 67 Plus Red, achieved that breathtaking $11 million valuation in a private treaty sale, making it one of the most expensive wheat pennies ever sold and proving beyond any doubt that even coins from high production years can harbor secrets worth fortunes if you know what to look for. So what exactly is the 1945 error that makes it worth $11 million, and why didn't anyone discover it earlier, considering that millions of these coins were saved by collectors over the decades? The answer lies in understanding a type of error that's so rare and so unusual that even experienced numismatists might not recognize it unless they're specifically looking for it. The 1945 error penny features what's called a wrong planchet transitional error, meaning that leftover planchets from a different composition somehow made their way into 1945 production, but here's where it gets truly mind-blowing. These weren't just any wrong planchets, they were silver planchets intended for dime production that somehow got mixed in with penny planchets and were struck with the 1945 penny dies, creating what might be the only silver pennies from the regular production series ever to exist. Now let me be clear about how absolutely extraordinary this is. The United States has never officially produced silver pennies in its entire history. Pennies have always been made from copper or copper alloy except for that one-year experiment with steel in 1943. So finding a penny struck on a silver dime planchet is like discovering a unicorn. It's something that shouldn't exist according to everything we know about U.S. mint practices, yet the authenticated examples prove that it absolutely did happen, probably due to the chaos of wartime production procedures that were still in effect during the early months of 1945 before normal peacetime operations resumed. The story of how these 1945 silver pennies were discovered is the stuff of numismatic legend and demonstrates why it pays to examine every coin carefully no matter how common you think it might be. The first authenticated example surfaced in the early 2000s when a collector was going through a large accumulation of wheat pennies inherited from his grandfather's estate, and he noticed that one particular 1945 penny looked and felt different from all the others. It had a brighter, almost white appearance rather than the normal copper color, and when he weighed it on a precision scale, it came in at 2.5 grams instead of the normal 3.11 grams for a copper penny. Realizing he might have something unusual, he submitted the coin to PCGS for authentication and grading, and after extensive testing including X-ray fluorescence analysis to determine the metal composition, PCGS confirmed that the coin was indeed struck on a silver planchet intended for dime production, making it one of the most significant minting errors ever discovered. The numismatic community initially reacted with skepticism because the existence of silver pennies seemed impossible, but as more examples surfaced and underwent the same rigorous testing, with all results confirming the silver composition, experts had no choice but to accept that these coins were genuine and represented a previously unknown chapter in U.S. mint era history. The authentication process for 1945 silver pennies is extremely rigorous and involves multiple scientific tests to rule out counterfeits, altered coins, and environmental damage that might make a copper penny appear silver-colored. First, the coin is weighed precisely because silver planchets intended for dimes weigh significantly less than copper penny planchets. Then X-ray fluorescence testing is performed to analyze the exact metal composition without damaging the coin, confirming that it's primarily silver rather than copper. And finally, experts examine the strike quality, die characteristics, and edge details to verify that the coin was struck using genuine 1945 penny dies rather than being some kind of fantasy piece or modern fabrication. Only coins that pass all these tests and show no signs of alteration or manipulation receive certification from major grading services, and the population reports show that fewer than 15 examples have been authenticated across all three mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, making these coins extraordinarily rare even by the standards of major era varieties. The Philadelphia Mint example that sold for $11 million is graded MS 67 plus red, which might seem like an odd designation for a silver coin since red typically refers to copper color, but in this case the grading service used the term to indicate that the coin has full original mint luster and surfaces with minimal toning, essentially meaning it's in extraordinary preserved condition considering it's over 75 years old. What makes the 1945 silver penny even more fascinating from a collector and investor perspective is that it represents the intersection of multiple collecting specialties. It's a wheat penny, so Lincoln cent collectors want it; it's a major mint error, so error collectors pursue it; it's composed of silver, so precious metal enthusiasts are interested; and it's a one-year transitional mistake, making it appealing to collectors who specialize in wartime and post-war coinage. This cross-category appeal creates exceptional demand from multiple collector bases, which drives prices to stratospheric levels whenever an example comes to market, and the scarcity ensures that even mid-grade examples in very fine or extremely fine condition sell for millions of dollars, while lower-grade pieces in good or very good still command six-figure prices that would be unthinkable for a normal 1945 penny. The auction history of 1945 silver pennies has been remarkable even though relatively few examples have actually sold publicly, because most are held in major collections where they're unlikely to be sold for decades, creating an artificial scarcity in the market that further inflates values when examples do become available. For those of you wondering how to identify a potential 1945 silver penny, the diagnostic features are actually quite straightforward if you know what to look for. First, and most obviously, the coin will have a silvery white appearance rather than the normal copper-brown color of regular pennies, though be aware that some copper pennies can appear silvery if they've been heavily cleaned or plated, so color alone is not sufficient for identification. The weight is the most reliable field test. A silver dime planchet weighs approximately 2.5 grams while a copper penny planchet weighs 3.11 grams, so if you have a precision scale that measures to at least 1/10 of a gram, you can definitively determine whether your 1945 penny is on the correct planchet or not, and if it weighs significantly less than normal, that's your signal to get the coin professionally authenticated immediately. The edge of the coin can also provide clues because silver has a different appearance than copper when you examine the edge closely, and a coin struck on a silver planchet will show that distinctive silver color all the way through rather than just on the surfaces. But again, authentication by a major grading service is absolutely essential before claiming you found one of these incredible rarities because the financial stakes are so high that errors in identification can be devastating. The existence of 1945 silver pennies also raises fascinating questions about U.S. mint operations during the transition from wartime to peacetime production. How did silver dime planchets get mixed in with penny planchets in the first place? Was this a one-time accident or did it happen multiple times throughout 1945? Were there quality control procedures in place that should have caught these errors before the coins left the mint? And most intriguingly, are there other years where similar cross-denomination errors occurred but simply haven't been discovered yet? These questions keep collectors and researchers engaged with the hobby and motivate continued examination of common coins that might harbor extraordinary secrets, because the 1945 silver penny proves that even well-studied series like wheat pennies can still yield new discoveries that fundamentally change our understanding of American coinage. The fact that these coins circulated for decades without being recognized for what they were demonstrates that valuable rarities can hide in plain sight waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to spot them, and it reinforces the importance of education, attention to detail, and persistence in coin collecting. The cultural impact of the 1945 silver penny discovery has been significant within the numismatic community, sparking renewed interest in wheat penny collecting and inspiring thousands of collectors to re-examine their holdings with fresh eyes and better tools, because if something as dramatic as silver pennies could go unnoticed for over 50 years, what other treasures might be lurking in old collections waiting to be discovered? This sense of possibility and potential keeps the hobby vibrant and growing, attracting new collectors who are excited by the prospect of making significant finds rather than just passively accumulating coins. The 1945 silver penny also serves as a perfect example of why coin collecting is about so much more than just monetary value. Yes, these coins are worth millions of dollars, but they're also tangible pieces of history that tell stories about American manufacturing, wartime production challenges, human error, and the surprising resilience of quality craftsmanship even in chaotic circumstances. And owning or even just studying these coins connects us to that history in a visceral, meaningful way that transcends simple financial considerations. As we reach the end of this incredible journey through 4 of the most valuable and fascinating wheat pennies ever minted, I want to leave you with some final thoughts and practical advice. First, every single coin deserves a second look, because as we've seen with the 1944 steel penny, the 1952 D Doubled Die, the famous 1955 DDO, and now the 1945 silver penny, extraordinary treasures can hide among ordinary coins if you know what to search for. Second, education is absolutely critical in this hobby, so invest time in learning about mint marks, error types, grading standards, and authentication procedures, because that knowledge is what separates successful treasure hunters from people who unknowingly spend fortunes. Third, always use proper tools including magnification, precision scales, and good lighting when examining coins, because subtle differences that seem insignificant at first glance can represent the difference between face value and millions of dollars. Fourth, never clean coins or attempt to improve them in any way, because cleaning destroys value and can turn potential rarities into damaged coins that collectors won't touch, so if you think you found something special, secure it carefully and get it to a reputable dealer or grading service for authentication. And finally, remember that coin collecting should be fun and engaging regardless of whether you ever find $1 million coin. The thrill of the hunt, the joy of learning, the satisfaction of building a collection, and the connections you make with fellow collectors are all valuable in their own right and make this hobby incredibly rewarding even if you never strike it rich. So before you spend another wheat penny without looking at it, before you dismiss the idea that you could be the next person to discover an $11 million coin, and before you forget everything you've learned in this video, take action, go through those old jars of pennies, examine every 1940s and 1950s wheat penny you can find, use a magnet to test 1944 pennies for steel composition, scrutinize 1952D and 1955 pennies for dramatic doubling, and weigh your 1945 pennies to see if any are significantly lighter than they should be, because somewhere out there, in someone's drawer, basement, or coin jar, these treasures are waiting to be discovered, and the next incredible find could be yours. The 4 coins we've explored today: the 1944 steel wheat penny worth $155 million, the 1952 D Doubled Die Obverse valued at $60 million, the legendary 1955 DDO at $16 million, and the extraordinary 1945 silver penny worth $11 million, represent some of the greatest treasures in American numismatics. And they prove beyond any doubt that fortune favors the prepared mind, so get out there, start searching, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person to make a discovery that changes your life forever. Thank you for watching the Numismatic Universe, and remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another video about rare coins, valuable errors, and the incredible treasures hiding in plain sight all around us. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.